Why would someone flee their own country? What could drive a person to such a choice? Or perhaps, put all these questions aside and ask this: is the root of these thoughts simply the refusal of a person to become a slave to any system? A 17-year-old girl lives in a small town in North Korea. One day, she decides to make a move to escape her country. Yes, her own country. On a day when North Korean soldiers are patrolling the area, she dares to take one step forward. Even that very first step could mean her death. Yet at the same time, that step could be the beginning of an unknown journey. But is it really possible to escape this country? To escape North Korea? North Korea is infamous for its oppression of its people and its weak human rights record. Under Kim Jong-un's regime, it has become even harder for citizens to flee. Yes, flee, because leaving North Korea legally is forbidden. Compared to the past, there are more fences, more soldiers, and in recent years a shoot-on-sight order has been given for those caught trying to escape. Still, hundreds of North Koreans risk their lives every year in pursuit of freedom. Weeks of grueling desert crossings, months of detention camps, and years of hiding, all of it just for freedom. Geographically, North Korea borders Russia, China, and South Korea. Most North Koreans dream of reaching South Korea because they share a common language and cultural heritage. Most importantly, South Korea actively accepts escapees, granting them citizenship. On the map, the route to South Korea might look like the easiest path. In reality, however, very few succeed this way. That is because the demilitarized zone, DMZ, between the two Koreas is one of the most dangerous borders in the world. Oh Chong-song is one of those who managed to escape. In 2017, he carried out a daring escape across the DMZ, which was established after the Korean War. The name may suggest demilitarized, but in reality it is heavily fortified and constantly monitored by armed guards. On a quiet Monday afternoon, the tense silence of this area was suddenly shattered. Yes, someone was trying to flee the country. A man, later identified as Oh Chong-song, drove a military jeep at high speed toward the borderline. Security camera footage recorded by the South Korean army clearly captured the intense chase. After a while, he abandoned his vehicle and continued on foot. North Korean soldiers opened fire multiple times, hitting him several times, but he still managed to cross the border and take cover behind a wall on the South Korean side. Hours later, South Korean soldiers rescued him. Normally, escape attempts through this area are extremely rare, and the chance of survival is almost zero. Of course, this is not the only way to flee. Another rare and extremely dangerous route southward is by sea. As you might guess, the next escape attempt we will look at happened in the water. Off the southeastern coast, a young North Korean man in his 20s entered the ocean wearing fins and a diving suit. After swimming for more than 6 hours and covering over 3 kilometers, he managed to reach shore near the South Korean town of Goseong. Although caught on security cameras, South Korean forces later found him resting under a tree. He turned out to be a North Korean fisherman seeking asylum. He likely had prior knowledge of sea conditions, otherwise, such an escape would have been impossible. To tell the truth, even this way is nearly impossible. Only a handful of people have ever succeeded like this. Similarly, escapes into Russia are also extremely rare. The border is heavily guarded, and the river is deep. Those known to have fled into Russia were usually privileged or high-ranking individuals who managed it with the help of connections. For most North Koreans, the most promising escape route is through China. The two countries are separated by the Yalu and Tumun rivers. Some parts of these rivers are shallow, and in winter they freeze up to waist height. This can provide a deceptive advantage. When the water is frozen solid, crossing over the ice might seem deceptively simple for the desperate. But crossing is only the beginning. The real danger starts in China. Escapees constantly face the threat of being caught and sent back. Minan grew up in a modest house overlooking the Yalu River, right on the North Korean border. From her backyard, she could see the hazy silhouettes of Chinese villages. Her family was relatively privileged. Her father was a peddler who often traveled to China for business, and her mother worked for the state, sometimes smuggling goods from China for extra income. This was a common practice for those living along the border, as worsening economic conditions forced people to seek additional sources of survival. When Minan was only 14, her life changed dramatically. It was 1994. One day, coming home from school, she found that her father was missing. He had been arrested while returning from China, accused of bribery and corruption. The family strongly suspected he had been tortured during interrogation. A few months later, he died in a hospital. Minan's mother and younger brother were left devastated and broken. At a young age, Minan began questioning the contradictions she saw around her: the suffering during famine, the lies of state propaganda, and the harsh realities of survival. By the age of 17, she made the decision that would change her life forever. She would escape North Korea. Her home was right on the North Korea-China border. It seemed impossible, but she had made up her mind. Even if it meant death, she would try. She began walking cautiously across the frozen Yalu River, while the sounds of North Korean soldiers echoed around her. On the other side lay China. Without hesitation, she made it across, achieving the impossible. Her plan was to visit relatives in the north. She sought help from a Chinese smuggler who often traded with her mother. Trusting him deeply, she agreed when he offered to take her to Shenyang, one of China's massive cities. For the first time, Minun saw a completely different world. Bright lights, crowded streets, abundant food, and endless goods. It all left her stunned. Weeks passed, and she turned 18. She longed to return to her family, but one day she received a phone call from her mother. Rumors had spread in town that she had disappeared, and people suspected she had left the country. Returning was now too dangerous. Her family feared punishment for allowing her escape. Her mother told her to stay in China no matter what and live freely. So Minun decided to remain in Shenyang. She began working in a restaurant and learned Mandarin, one of the most widely spoken Chinese languages. But she lived in constant fear of being caught. To avoid detection, she used many different names. One day, two men entered the restaurant where she worked. They asked her name and showed police badges. They immediately took her away. At the station, she was interrogated for hours and forced to complete a written exam in Mandarin. With trembling hands and in the midst of a panic attack, she somehow managed to finish the test. Mandarin is an extremely difficult language, and for someone from North Korea, mastering it takes years. But Minun passed. If the police had doubted her fluency, she would have been deported to North Korea without question. All her efforts, every risk she had taken, would have been wasted. Deciding not to take further risks, she boarded a train to Shanghai in 2002. This marked a new chapter in her life. In the megacity, she met a human trafficker who provided her with a new identity in exchange for all her savings. With this, she secured a job as a translator for a South Korean technology company. Slowly, she began building her life, saving money, and eventually falling in love with a South Korean man. Together, they planned to go to Seoul, the South Korean capital, and seek asylum there. After years of struggle, Minun finally boarded a plane to South Korea. Freedom was so close, but immigration officers were skeptical of her story. She was detained for weeks and interrogated multiple times. Eventually, she was granted permanent residency. She had made it. But her journey was not truly over. Her mother and younger brother were still in North Korea. Years later, using her savings, she managed to organize their escape as well, bringing them to South Korea through China. Today, Minun goes by the name Hyeonseo Lee. She has become a human rights activist and a voice for those still trapped in North Korea, continuing the fight for freedom. Her story may seem short when told like this, but her pursuit of freedom lasted more than 10 years. Her faith and courage carried her into a life free from fear. She even wrote a book titled The Girl with 7 Names, a North Korean defector's story. Minun's story is one of pain, loss, and resilience. Above all, it is proof of the unbreakable spirit of those who refuse to live in chains.
A harrowing escape from North Korea. A young soldier risking his life driving across the no man's land of the DMZ.
So I escaped across the border to China. There were 4 people with me. So you have to cross the Tumon River. It's a river between China and North Korea. So we actually walked, 5 of us, and at night time. But if you were discovered, you could be shot and killed.